Well, thank you very much, Jared. Hi, this is Adam Manson. I'm here today with O'Day Murray and Mitchell Cameron. And we wanted to put together this presentation because we wanted to answer one of the most frequently asked questions that we get, which is, how can I best search deal stats and get the comps that I'm looking for? So today we're going to talk about deal stats, provide some information about the platform, and then we're going to go over 5 search scenarios to help you maximize your use of the database. Stats, and we combined it with our public company transaction data set from Public Stats. And we brought those two data sets together and put them under a new platform with enhanced technology and enhanced functionality. And the reason that we did this was we wanted to provide new search features and new functionality that we couldn't provide in the legacy Pratt Stats and Public Stats search interfaces. In bringing these two data sets together, we have a now combined total of over 35,000 transactions. We're actually pretty close to 36,000 transactions now. And we also added several new data fields when we went online in July 2018. And this brought us up to it brought us up to 164 data fields per transaction. We get the data for deal stats from 2 different sources. The first is from our contributor network. So our contributor network makes up about 2/3 of all the transactions that are in the Deal Stats platform. And this is a group of business brokers, M&A advisors, and other transaction professionals. And these professionals share information with BVR when they participate in a deal. And we take this information, we work with them, and we include this information into the Deal Stats database. Another data set that we include, which accounts for about 1/3 of all transactions, are deals that we document from the SEC's EDGAR search page. And we look through various public company filings, and we look for acquisitions of public companies, either made by other public companies or acquisitions of public companies made by private equity groups. We also look for acquisitions of private companies made by public companies. And where there's sufficient information, we go ahead and document this for inclusion in Deal Stats. And the review and approval process works kind of like this with the different transaction sets that we get and we include in Deal Stats. When a transaction comes in from a member of our contributor network, it's initially reviewed by one analyst who works with the contributor to get any kind of questions answered that might be outstanding. After that process is complete, that analyst will send that transaction to a second analyst who will then provide another set of eyes and work with the initial analyst to get any other questions answered. That final analyst will then, when everything's complete, approve the deal and will be included in Deal Stats. For transactions that we document from EDGAR, we have an analyst who will initially write up the transaction, and when they're complete, they'll send that transaction data to a second analyst. That second analyst will review all the financials and all the other information against the original SEC filings. And when everything looks complete and is verified, they'll send it to a third analyst who will review and then approve the deal for inclusion in Deal Stats. So our goal with this process is to make sure that the data is thoroughly reviewed and vetted, and that to the best of our ability we're able to verify that everything that we report is correct and accurate. And this slide here is just a longer explanation of the small chart that we had on that previous slide. And you can access the platform Deal Stats, if you're a subscriber, so if you purchase 12-month access or 24-month access, you can access the platform under MyBVR, just like you access your other data products. So you just log into our website, you navigate to MyBVR, and you'll see Deal Stats among your list of products that you have access to. If you're a non-subscriber, you can purchase day pass access to the platform. So if you have a project that you're working on or an assignment, you can purchase access for 24 hours, and you can jump in and can use the platform for a full day. And if you're a contributor, you have access. You can receive access for 3 months for each transaction that you contribute. And so if you participate in a transaction and you register with us, you can submit that information. And once it's approved and included in the database, you'll receive 3 months of credit, which you can use to access Deal Stats. And if you want to get involved in this program, you can just visit bvresources.com/contribute. And that page will have information on how you can register with us and how you can submit transaction data online. Okay, excellent. So right now I'm going to pass it over to O'Day Murray, who's going to take us through our first search scenario in Deal Stats.
All right, well, thank you, Adam. Let's go ahead and dive right into the Deal Stats platform. But before we talk about the 5 scenarios that we will be presenting today, I just want to give a general overview of how the DealStats database is structured. The DealStats database is structured into 2 main sections. The top section is a section where we will have the functionalities of filtration, adjusting our display, sorting, downloading our information, and other useful user references, which we will walk through and talk about here soon, as well as the bottom section, which will contain the information regarding the transactions, the statistics, insights, which we will dive into with some of our examples, scenarios here soon, summary, and where we will be applying our multiples and adjusting those multiples to derive an equity value. Now, with that being said, let's dive straight into our first scenario. In our first scenario, we are a business intermediary with a client that wants to list her non-franchise business, which is a pizza restaurant, and we want to figure out what's a general, reasonable listing price for us to list her business at. And for us to do so, all we have to do is go to the DealStats platform and try to look for a couple of comparables, general comparables, without doing too much analysis, so we can get that general fair listing price. And for us to do so, first thing we're going to do is we're going to go to the SIC codification, so we can pick the general codification that will return to us transactions are within the restaurant space. And for that, all we have to do is we can go to the Quick Search tab, click on the SIC or SIC codification field, and we're going to be looking for 5800. And for that, we're going to go down to the retail trade, general SIC, and we're going to expand our searches to go ahead and click on 5800. We're not limiting ourselves to whether alcohol is involved with the restaurant or not. We're just going to go ahead and pick that general codification. And the second thing that we're going to do here for us to look for some general comps is we're going to utilize a size element to look for comparables that are within the same size range as our target company, or the company that we want to list. And for that, we're going to utilize the net sales field, and we're going to go ahead and look for comparables that have a revenue range of anywhere between $100,000 to $500,000. And after that, we're going to go ahead and, as you can see right here at the bottom, we're going to just double check the number of comparables that we have so far. So far, we have around 2,425 comps, but we still have a little bit of filtration that we want to do. So if you recall from the previous couple of seconds, we specified that this is a non-franchise pizza restaurant. So we want to make sure that we're looking for non-franchised restaurants which are more comparable. And for that, we're going to go ahead and look for the franchise filter. So under the Quick Search tab, this is the tab where you will have generally utilized or frequently utilized fields that users, practitioners use for looking for comparables. But there's also a secondary list of other commonly used fields. And under that secondary list, to get to that secondary list, all we have to do is click on the Add Search Field button. And we're looking for the franchise field, so we're going to go ahead and click on franchise, and that will be added to our current list. And we're going to go ahead and click on that filtration criteria, and we're going to select no. We don't want comparables that are franchises to be returned. And at this point, we now have restaurants, a list of 2,082 comparables list of restaurants, but as you recall, we're looking for pizza restaurants. So if we want to narrow it down to that specific set, all we have to do is we need to go to the target business description here, under the mini search engine, under the target business description in the data grid. All we have to do is type in the word pizza, and then that will add an extra filtration layer that will utilize everything that we've done in the past, plus add the extra filter of saying, please specify only target comps that have the pizza in the business description, which leaves us with around 252 comparables to utilize for our analysis. And from there on, we're going to go ahead and check the statistics table and make sure that all the valuation multiples are, or there is enough information for all valuation multiples, so we can just get the general overview of what's available and what the stats are looking like. And after that, we're going to go ahead and get that general listing price that we want for our clients. And for us to do so, we're going to go ahead and go to the Multiples tab. And we have a couple of information regarding our client's non-franchise pizza restaurant. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to input that under the subject company information. So the Multiples tab, this is going to be the tab where we're going to input information on our subject company and where we're going to apply the multiple so we can get an estimated firm value. With that, we have some information on our target company or on our client's company. We know that our client's company makes around $100,000 worth of net sales, and that she has around $40,000 in discretionary earnings. So we have that information available to us, and we're going to go ahead and input that in the subject company information section. And we're going to go ahead and start applying our multiples now. There are two ways for us to apply our multiples. One way, we can utilize the weighted multiples application method or the contribution multiples application method. One is weight-based, and the other one is percentage-based. So we're going to go ahead and utilize the weight-based for this example. And for this example, we're going to go ahead and we're going to look for the median multiple. So when we click on the select statistical measure to use section, it's going to ask us, well, which statistical measure do you want to use, or do you want the database to pull up for all of these valuation multiples right here on the right-hand side. So we're going to utilize the median. And as you can see, the valuation multiples were pulled up right here on the right-hand side, of which then we can elect to apply weights because we're using the weighted multiple application method. And for this purpose, we're going to give the MVIC, the net sales, a weight of 1, and we're going to give the MVIC, the SDE, a weight of 2, which will give us a range of values for our target company. And from there on, we can utilize that information and present it to our clients, and we're going to go ahead and walk through how we can do that. Just as a reminder, you can utilize the same methodology, but instead of assigning weights, you can utilize percentages. So you can give like 50% to MVIC net sales, and the other 50, the remaining 50 could be to MVIC to SDE in this application method here. For us to download the information and to present our findings to our client, we're going to go ahead and scroll up to the top section of the database, and we're going to click on the Downloads tab. And with the Downloads tab, we have a couple of download features, but for the purposes of this scenario, we're going to download a couple of items which we will present to our clients. First of all, we're going to download the Excel download which will contain information that comes from the Statistics, Insights, Summary, and Multiples and Equity tab. So everything that comes from these tabs will be presented in the Excel, as well as all of the work that we've done under the Multiples tab, which we've done in the past couple of seconds here. And as it's downloading, we're going to we're going to pull that up, and we're going to show you exactly what's found in that Excel spreadsheet, so you can get a better understanding and a better overview of what's available inside. And as I said, the statistics table is found in there, as well as the graphical interfaces that are found into the Insights tab. We'll dive deeper into these in a different scenario coming up here shortly, but just as a general overview, this is what is presented within this download option. The graphical representations, the statistical summaries, as well as the work that you've done under the Multiples tab, where you have derived your estimation regarding that suggested price. Also, the next thing that we're going to do here is we're going to download the DealStats PDF report. And the DealStats PDF report, it's a very good report that we can utilize for just general, first engagements with our clients, and it gives us a good indication of sort of what we looked at. So it's going to provide us with, right here at the top, it's going to tell us, well, if our client asks us, well, how did you derive this value, which you presented to me in the Excel download, well, we can tell them, well, we went to DealStats, we found around 255 comparables. This is the search criteria that we utilized to get to those 255 comparables. Here are those general statistics, which they can look at, and we can tell them, hey, we used the median because for whatever purpose, this is why we utilized it, and it shows us also in the PDF report all of the list of comparables that feed into these statistics. So they can also look at the companies and see, okay, well, is this a good comparable to my company, to my business, or not? So this is just a general, good documentation to present for, first engagements with your client regarding these assignments. And
hey, Ode, before you jump into your next search scenario, we had a couple questions. I was hoping maybe we could just answer those before we move on.
Sure thing.
So the first one we have here is basically the question is, how long does it take for a transaction to be included in the database? So the example here is, for example, if a transaction got completed in 12/31/2018, around when approximately would it appear on the database? So it doesn't specifically say whether this was coming from a member of our contributor network or if it's a transaction that we documented from Edgar. So I guess we can answer it both ways. But if it's a transaction that comes in from a member of our contributor network, it really depends. Some of our contributors submit transactions almost immediately after they close. Some do them in batches. So it's really hard to say. It could be anywhere from 1 week to maybe even a year if it comes in from a member of our contributor network. For transactions that we document at Edgar, typically when a transaction closes, we'll identify that transaction from an 8K, so a current report that the buyer files with the SEC. But to get the actual information that we use to document that transaction, so any of the financial statements, the detailed selling price, a purchase price allocation, we wait till that amended current report is released, which is the 8K filing, and that can be upwards of 3 months after the transaction closes. So it really kind of depends. Maybe 3 to 4 months after a transaction closes and we document it from the the SEC or from Edgar, or anywhere from a week to several quarters after it's closed by a member of our contributor network. We also have a question here. How many comparable transactions in DealStats under NAICS code starting with 6.2? So if you have a question about how many transactions are included in a specific industry and you don't have access to DealStats, just please reach out to us directly. We can answer some of those questions for you. Our email address is dataquestions@bbresources.com. And if you need any help searching outside of this presentation, please reach out and we're happy to help. Another person says some buyers ask if the multiple includes AR or inventory. So generally, for asset sales that are included in DealStats, so specific to the transactions that we receive from our contributors, generally the multiple and the selling price will include the value of inventory, but it will not include accounts receivable, which is, I know, somewhat different from the BizComps database where they don't include the value of inventory. For transactions that we document from Edgar and specifically stock sales, they generally do include accounts receivable and inventory. But it's sometimes AR does transfer in the asset sales we do collect, so it's always important, I think, to look at a purchase price allocation for the specific transaction, just so you can see what assets were actually acquired and at what value. So you can look at a purchase price allocation that's included for almost every transaction if you want a definitive answer on a transaction by transaction basis. And somebody asked the difference between getting to equity values and getting to equity values using stock sales versus asset sales. Generally because the assets that transfer are different overall between the two transaction types, as well as the liabilities that are assumed. We have a tab for that. Do you want to click on the equity tab really fast, Ode?
Yeah.
So this provides a general template of the type of add backs that you would do if you're using asset sales or stock sales. And this is just basically a general template, up towards the top a little bit more there. Thank you. It's just a general template based on how we collect the data. And this is also included in the companion guide. So if you're not a user of DealStats or you don't have access, if you go to the DealStats product page, you can download the companion guide and find these general templates as well as an expanded explanation. But this is basically how we collect the data and sort of the add backs that you would go through to get to an equity value. But at the same time, everything, some transactions are unique, like we just talked about. An asset sale might include accounts receivable. So it's really important to read the purchase price allocation for each transaction if you want, to specifically know what assets were acquired and what liabilities were assumed. So I'll let you go back, Ode, to your second search scenario.
All right. Well, thank you. Those are really good questions. So with those being answered, we're going to go ahead and dive into our second scenario. Before we do that, we're going to go ahead and reset the database. And for us to do so, all we have to do is click on the reset button right here at the top right corner of the view, and that will refresh the database for us to start a completely new search. And within the secondary scenario, we are an appraiser that's in Canada, and we want to include the market approach in our valuation report. And in this case, we are valuing a landscaping company business. So we're trying to look for, in this situation, we're trying to look for comparables within Canada. But as we will find here soon, that potentially sometimes we are limited with the information. The information can be quite sparse in some situations. So we might resort to expanding our search to including other comparables found in other countries. And in this situation, we're going to be expanding to the United States. So to start things off, we're going to go ahead and look for the specific NAICS codification for the landscaping company business. And for us to do so, we're going to go to the NAICS filtration, which will provide us with the NAICS tree here on the right-hand side. And we're going to be looking for the NAICS code 561730. So we're going to be going to 5617 and 3 and 30. So landscaping services. All right, and that gives us, so far, we have around 607 comparables to utilize for our analysis. But we're going to go ahead and add a size filtration criteria, and for that, we're going to utilize also the net sales as a proxy for size. And we're going to go ahead and look for comparables that have a net sales range of anywhere between $500,000 to $1 million. And that drops down our comparable set to 71 transactions, of which then we want to, for this assignment, we want to make sure that we have the most recent or up-to-date information. So we're going to go ahead and select a particular range of when these deals closed. So we're going to be looking at the last 5 years worth of information. We're going to go ahead and click on the sale date filtration option and select the condition between. And we're going to go ahead and apply that 5-year range. And we're going to go ahead and input that here. And that drops down our comparables to around 33 transactions. And now we're going to go ahead and look for comparables in Canada. And for us to do so, we're going to go to the search tab. And we're going to be typing in target country. And we're going to be adding that filter here on the right-hand side. And we're going to be looking for Canada as the target company's location. And in this situation, as you see, we are only limited to one comparable, which is not ideal at all. So we want to, in this case, we want to resort to, comparables that are found within other countries, more preferably within more comparable economies. And in this situation, we're going to go ahead and also add the filtration for target country again. But in this case, we're going to also add the United States. Now that drops down our search to 0, and there's a reason for that, and this is a very common question and very common scenario. So this sort of highlights how the filtration is acting. Just as a reminder, everything under the search tab works together in conjunction, utilizing AND logic. So in this case, what this is telling the database is return to me a transaction where the target country of the target was in Canada and in the United States. So that's not typical. So what we're going to do is we're going to switch that logic over from an AND logic to an OR logic. And for us to do so, we're going to go to the left-hand side, top left, and we're going to switch that over to apply any criteria selected OR. And that's going to say return to me transactions where the target country is located in Canada or in the United States, and apply everything else that we have specified in the Quick Search tab. So the Search tab and the Quick Search tab work together in conjunction using AND logic. And when we scroll down here, we'll see that we have around 33 comparables, which we can use for our analysis. But we'd like to dive deeper into these 33 comparables. And for us to do so, we can go ahead and scroll on the list of comparables right here under the Data tab. And if we find a particular transaction that we want to look more into detail, we can elect to pull up the transaction report of this particular transaction. All we have to do is click the Generate Transaction Report, which is the orange icon located here on the left-hand side of the row. And every row is comparable, so we're going to go ahead and click on this icon so we can further examine this comparable. And within the transaction report, you will find everything that has to do with the transaction, anything ranging from the target information regarding the target company, information regarding the deal, how it was structured, whether there was debt assumed, how much was paid in cash, seller financing, financial information regarding the target company, income statement, the balance sheet, the purchase price allocation, as well as any other additional information, which includes information regarding leasing information, non-compete agreements, employment agreements, and so on. Also, there's a quick section that provides you with the valuation multiples and financial ratios of the target company. So after we look through our comparable data set and we assess whether we want a transaction to be included in our analysis or not, let's say this transaction that we currently just opened the transaction report for a particular reason we don't want to include this within our analysis, all we have to do is press or uncheck the checkbox which is located on top of the Generate Transaction Report icon, and as we uncheck it, this will be excluded from our analysis, from our statistics, and from any downloads that we utilize in the future. And that summarizes the scenario number 2, and I believe we have a question.
Thank you, Uday. So we have a couple questions that, let's just go ahead and field these before we go on to our third search scenario. So the first one is, if asset deals often do not include accounts receivable, then how do you calculate MVIC? How do you adjust the price to reflect the value of accounts receivable? Okay, so we report MVIC with the value of accounts receivable if they did transfer. So we don't make any adjustment. We don't remove that value from MVIC and recalculate the multiples. But it's not often, at least in the asset sales we receive at BVR, that accounts receivable are included. And I'll ask this of both of you guys. So I know you guys see a lot of transactions that come in, asset transactions from members of our contributor network. Approximately what percentage would you say include transferred accounts receivable?
I'd say it's a pretty small amount. It's probably closer to about 5% or so of the transactions that are asset sales. And usually those tend to be maybe more Main Street businesses. It might be something that occurs when it's a more middle market. But as far as the Main Street businesses, it's a pretty low percentage.
Okay. Uday, what are you seeing?
I would agree with Mitchell. That's exactly. I would put it at a 5%. It's really the minority of what we get.
Okay. That makes total sense. Okay, so we don't make adjustments for it, but it's not a very frequent thing. Maybe about 5% of the transactions we receive. Another question here is, do you recommend deselecting companies with extreme multiples? Well, that's a good question, and I think it kind of comes down to professional judgment. So, if you have a reason that you want to exclude a company from your comparable company list or your comparable company set, and you can explain why, then I think that's completely reasonable. Some measures of central tendency, like median, might not be skewed by some of those extreme multiples, so it might not be so much of an issue. But ultimately, it comes down to the specific practitioner and analyst to make that decision. So another question, is there a specific reason you would use the NAICS code for search criteria rather than the SIC or the SIC code? Do you guys want to talk a little bit about the difference between NAICS codes and SIC codes?
Yeah, sure. So the general difference between SIC code and NAICS code is that SIC code is much more broad, and there's a reason behind why it's a more broader codification system. It's because it hasn't been updated in quite some time, or it doesn't update frequently, or it just never updated. With the NAICS codification, it's a more up-to-date, it's a more specific codification system. It tries to keep up with the times. Every 5 years, it updates. And the codification, as I've seen with how it's been changing every single time, it's being extremely granular as opposed to the SIC. So the SIC codification is much more general. The NAICS codification is much more granular, and it depends on how you want to go about searching for your comparables. You can go the codification route, or you can go the general business description route. But that would be the general difference from how I view the SIC codifications and the NAICS codification.
Okay, it makes complete sense. So SIC codes haven't been updated since 1987. NAICS codes get updated every 5 years, and so they have the benefit of being potentially more up to date and more granular. So another question here: how do you search using both SIC and NAICS? And so on that quick search tab, can you make a selection under both the SIC tree and the NAICS tree?
So you can only utilize either the SIC codification or the NAICS codification, but you cannot utilize them in conjunction under the quick search tab.
Okay.
But with the search tab, you can, how we said how we did the example with the target country, when we said, we're looking for transactions that have a target country that's found in Canada or in the United States. Under the search tab, you can use the NAICS codifications and the SIC codifications together using ORLogic. But under the quick search tab, you have to either elect to use SIC codifications or NAICS codifications. But with this, under the search tab, you can utilize as many NAICS codes or as many SIC codes, but you need to use the ORLogic.
Okay, excellent. Another question here is, this came in when you were searching by country.
Yeah.
I'm not sure exactly what it means, but it says, is applying this filter the same as applying geographic location? So I think generally, you can search by country, in the platform. You can search by state. You can also search by region within the U.S. So it's basically a location-based search. And this right here, as O'Day was doing, is based on where the target company was located. There's also a field where you can search by acquirer country for some of those larger transactions that could potentially be cross-border. Another question here, is there a way to sort comparables by minimum or maximum stock prices?
Yeah.
Okay, so we're not reporting any per share values or any equity prices in the database, but if you want to sort by MVIC, which is the deal stat selling price, the market value of invested capital of the transaction, you can do an ascending and descending sort. And something we're going to cover later is how you can add whatever fields you want to this data tab, and any field that you add here is sortable. A question here says, how do you calculate gross profit margin? Gross profit divided by revenue. Another question here. So it says, you mentioned AR isn't usually included in the MVIC for asset sales. Is any working capital included cash? So we report the transactions as we receive the data. The only adjustment that we generally make is that we will back out the value of real estate from that MVIC price. Also, if any sort of employment or consulting agreement was included in that MVIC price, we'll back it out. If any sort of earn-out or contingent payments were included, we'll back it out. But we're not going through and making working capital changes to our actual MVIC price. So I guess to answer the question, what all generally is included, for asset sales, for what we see and how we receive them, no cash generally doesn't transfer in the smaller asset sales. Typically, of the current assets and current liabilities, it's inventory. So we see, the transfer of inventory, occasionally, not often, like we talked about, 5% of the time, approximately, maybe accounts receivable. Also very seldom cash, and usually, not often current liabilities. Do you guys see accounts payable being assumed by the?
No.
Okay.
Almost never.
Okay. So not often. So mostly just inventory gets included. Here's another one. Should you filter the transactions based on recent sales date? For example, only use transactions in the past 5 to 10 years. That's another, I think, example of a professional judgment call. There's some industries that, time periods might be more or less significant. If you pull up the Deal Stats Companion Guide and you look at some analysis of, revenue multiples and SD multiples for, asset transactions over the last 15 years, you'll see very little deviation. And granted, that's not at the industry level, that's at the, the total transaction, asset sales, level. So it might be something to consider if you're looking at a particular industry and that there might be, any sort of, specific events or periods where, companies were selling for more or less. So it really depends. It's maybe something that warrants further analysis, based on what you're doing. So, okay. Well, thank you. So with that, I think we can go to our next search scenario.
All right. And before we dive into the next scenario, we're going to go ahead and reset our database again so we can start off with a fresh search. And within this scenario, we are also a business appraiser, but this time we're appraising a single-family houses contractor company. And we also want to utilize the market approach. And for us to utilize the market approach, in our valuation report, we're going to go ahead and try to find some comparables from DealStats. While we're going through the comparables, we might find some outliers within our comparable data set, which we will walk through how we can go ahead and figure out if there are outliers in the first place by utilizing some of the DealStats visualization tools, and how we can go about taking them away from our analysis. So for this case, we're going to be utilizing the SICK codification tree, and I'm going to be looking for the code 1521. So under construction, that's 15, general SICK, and then break that down and find 1521. And that's going to give me around 98 comparables. And for this analysis, I'm going to concentrate on transactions that are only found within the United States. As you can recall from our first scenario, we want to click on the Add Search field to drop down other frequently used fields. And in this situation, the other frequently used field that we're looking for is a target country. And we're going to drop that down to our list of fields to filter by. And we're going to click on the United States geographical region, just to make sure that we're only looking at United States companies. And as we have the 94 comparables, we're going to go ahead and start looking at some of the insights, some of the statistics, making sure that we have enough multiples or enough counts for each multiple, enough counts for each financial ratios to make sure that this is sufficient enough information for our analysis. And we're going to go ahead and we're going to look at the Insights tab, get a general sense of the distribution of this comparable data set. And as we can see right here under the scatter plot section, in this situation we are looking at the MVIC price to net sales scatter plot. We will see that there are some comparables in this situation. This comparable right here that is unusually large compared to the general data set. So we might want to exclude that from our analysis, and this right here is the figure for the MVIC price. And for us to exclude that from our analysis, all we have to do is go back to the Data tab where our comparables are found, and tracing back to one of the questions that were previously answered, how can I go about sorting? So for this situation, we're going to sort, and we're going to be sorting by MVIC price because that number was pertaining to the MVIC price, and we want to sort the MVIC field or column by simply clicking on it. The first click will sort from smallest to greatest, and then the second click will sort from greatest to smallest. And here is that comparable that we found in that graphical representation. And we want to go ahead and we want to exclude that from our analysis because that's an unusual comparable regarding the entire data set. We're going to go back to the Insights tab and see how that varies. And also, we'll find that this other comparable as well seems to be a bit skewed, not really moving towards the general linear regression line. Perhaps this is also an outlier that we want to exclude. So all we have to do is also go back to the data set and exclude that from our analysis. It was the one that had this figure within the MBIC price. And after removing our outliers, we're going to go ahead and look through the list of transaction reports for all of our comparables so we can dive deeper into the ones that we want to continue to include within our report. And as we demonstrated before, you can pull up the transaction report by simply clicking on the orange icon and observing the details of the comparable. And after you've understood what you want to include and exclude from your analysis, you'll go ahead and download the comparables that you have thus far, and you can utilize that for your market approach for your valuation report. And that concludes the scenario number 3, of which I will now kick it over to Mitchell Cameron, who will walk us through scenario number 4 and scenario number 5.
All right, thank you, Ode. So I'm going to go ahead and just reset this before we begin. All right, for scenario number 4, we are a research associate that is assigned to periodically review data on companies within the services industry that have revenues over 100 million. So we can begin by clicking on, under SIC, just the 70, which is the general SIC code. And if I expand the SIC code tree, you'll notice that it checks all SIC codes within this general code. So now that we've done that, let's also go to the net sales. And for the minimum on net sales, I'm going to enter in the 100 million. All right, and it looks like that has provided about 706 comparables so far. So now let's take a look at some of this information, and we can do that by looking at the summary tab. And you'll notice that the Summary tab has all the criteria that we've used to search for our comparables. So it has all the SIC codes that were selected, and then it also has the net sales value that was greater than or equal to 100 million. And then you'll notice that we have valuation multiples here at the top, and then below that are our profitability ratios, liquidity ratios, leverage ratios, and activity ratios. And for our purposes, we've been instructed to take a look at these median values, just because these median values will be less susceptible to influence by any outliers within our data set. All right, so let's assume that we took a look at that information and everything looks great, and we want to incorporate this into our report. An easy way of going about doing that is up here in the top right corner of the Summary tab is a copy feature. If we click on that copy feature, it's going to copy all the data within the Summary tab in this format. And so this is a really great feature for including this information into my text editing software, such as Microsoft Word, so that I can easily incorporate it into my report. All right, now that we've done that, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to save this template that I have created with my search criteria. So that way in the future when I want to come back, it'll already be completed. So to begin doing that, I'm going to click on the Save feature and click Save As. And for this, I'm going to put SIC 70. Oh, okay. And under the notes, I'm going to put All right, so I just put a save screen reflecting SIC 70 and net revenues greater than 100 million. This will just allow me to know what is contained within this template. So I'm going to go ahead and save that screen. And then at this point, I can either walk away or reset to do another search within the database. But let's assume that I want to pull back that information up, at a different time period, let's say a month or a quarter from now. I can easily do that by clicking on the Recent button under the DealStats logo up here at the top, clicking on the SIC 70, and you'll notice that it has the name that I saved, the notes that I saved, and also timestamps, which are helpful. And then if I apply that, we'll see that the 70 services general SIC code was saved, and the net sales with the minimum value of 100 million was also saved. So this will be good if I want to come back at a future date. All right, so that's scenario 4.
Before we jump into scenario 5, it looks like we have a couple of questions that maybe hopefully we can answer before we move to the next search. So the first one is, wouldn't the multiples assume there is a reasonable amount of working capital in the business, whether using the income or market approach? So if AR is not included, how should one adjust MVIC or sales price? So the multiple reflects the bundle of assets that were transferred, that were purchased. So to the I guess the effect of if AR is not transferred, that's not going to be included in the sale price and therefore not reflected in the multiple. That would be part of one of the add backs that would be addressed after you've applied that multiple to your subject company's earnings stream. So if you're using a multiple for asset sales, from DealStats, generally you're getting the value of inventory, fixed assets, and intangibles. To the extent that there are, other assets, accounts receivable, present in your subject company, that would be added back after applying the multiple. So it doesn't, assume there's any sort of working capital included. If you're familiar with using the BizComps database, that price includes, fixed assets plus intangibles. So basically, you're getting the value of your subject company's fixed assets and intangibles by applying a multiple from that database. To the extent that there's anything else, that'd be addressed in the add backs. So here we have, which is the best ratio to use for comparables based on sales, SDE, or EBITDA? When is it advisable to use MVIC to sales? So, generally, it really depends on the practitioner, but with some smaller Main Street businesses that have a single owner-operator, I think our users might commonly use an SDE multiple. For larger businesses that have multiple owners or that are kind of more like lower middle market or middle market, I think EBITDA might be a commonly used multiple. MVIC to sales can be used in conjunction with an SDE or EBITDA multiple or any other multiple. So I think as OJ demonstrated in one of his earlier searches, he applied an MVIC to sales multiple and an MVIC to SDE multiple, and then based on his own professional judgment analysis, whether it was his experience with the industry or the type of business or even just reviewing maybe even coefficients of variation, he weighted them in a certain way, so they don't really have to be mutually exclusive. Somebody asked, can we watch this again and how do we do it? So this webinar and all our webinars are recorded and they'll be posted to our website. So I believe there'll be information distributed once that's available to everybody who attended or everybody who registered. Here's another question. Do you have other training that is online or in webinars? That's actually a great question. Do you mind, Mitchell, jumping over to the user references tab really fast? Mm-hmm. So, I know that, you have to be a subscriber to DealStats to be on the platform, as Mitchell is right now. But all these resources that you see here, with the exception of the DealStats Value Index, those are all available on the product page for DealStats. So we have a companion guide. The companion guide, it gives an in-depth history of the database, back from, the inception of Pratt Stats to the creation of DealStats. It talks about how we collect the data, where it comes from, how we review the data. It talks about doing searches, what to consider, how to apply the multiples. It's a pretty comprehensive guide. So I know we're seeing it here from within the platform, but if you go to the DealStats product page, you'll find the same link there. There's also a video tutorials link. And what we've done is we've gone through and we've created a brief video tutorial on every single section that's included within DealStats. So if you want to learn more about quick search, display, anything that we have available, you can watch this series of video tutorials. We have an FAQ page. The FAQ page addresses questions that we get frequently. It also defines all the terms used in the database. It also provides every calculation that we make, so you can see the formula for those calculations. And if you have something that's not answered and not addressed, reach out to us. We have a little link there. It says questions and feedback. So that goes to dataquestions@bbresources.com, and we're happy to help out in any way that we can. So reach out to us anytime. Okay, I think that covers. I think we can jump into the last search scenario.
Yeah, that last question is a good transition into this fifth scenario. So in this fifth scenario, we are a private equity analyst who is assigned to research comparable information about a potential target the firm is looking to acquire. This target company is a new vehicle parts wholesaler and is younger than a lot of similar companies within the same space. So our goal is to kind of gather some summary statistics on the various ratios that will kind of provide us with an idea of what the company's financial ratios will look like in the future. So one thing that we can do is actually starting off here with the User References tab. We have all these tools available to us, but one of them that is going to be really useful is this DealStats Value Index. So the DealStats Value Index is similar to the PDU from the legacy PratStats database that we had, and it's a quarterly publication that summarizes all the information within the DealStats database. So I'll go ahead and open it up for you guys real quick, and we can take a look at the information within here. A lot of the information is based on the valuation multiples over time and by industry, but it also highlights some other multiples that are useful to take a look at as well. So one of the multiples that I want to take a look at is going to be the gross profit margin. And I can find a median for that starting on page 11, and that's going to be broken down by industry. And so if I scroll down to page 11, down here at the bottom it's median gross profit margins by sector. And so if we look at the 42, which is wholesale trade, I can see how those gross profit margins for that sector have changed over time, which is really actually kind of interesting because then we can see if there's a lot of variance within the data points. And then if I want to also take a look at median operating profit, I can do that by industry over time as well, which is also very helpful. But for our purposes, we're going to go back to the DealStats database to kind of get a little more in-depth look at our some target comparables. And so first what we'll try doing is we're going to look up an industry code. So if you're unsure about a particular SIC or NAICS code, you can click on one of these links and it'll take you to the government website where you can perform that search. So under the keyword search, I'm just going to type in automotive and search on the OSHA website for SIC codes. And if we scroll down, it looks like motor vehicle supplies and new parts is going to be SIC 5013. And I can confirm that by saying, okay, look, automotive parts, new wholesale, let's use that code. So if we go back, I'll now click again on the quick search, which is this original page that we come to when we refresh the database. And I'm going to look for that SIC 5013. So it's under wholesale trade, 5013, motor vehicle supplies and new parts. So it looks like that provided me with about 71 transactions so far. And I'm also looking for comparable companies that are a little bit older. So I'm going to go back up to the search portion, and under search now, I'm going to look for companies older, 10 years or older. And I can do that by typing in age
and we'll see that target age is in here. And then for the condition, I can do greater or equal than, and I'm going to enter in 10. So that brought our comparables down to about 38, which I think is going to be pretty reasonable for what we're looking for. So down here in this data grid, it doesn't have everything, the ratios that I'm looking for, but I can add those ratios in by changing the display of this data grid. And to do that, I'll go up to the top section, and next to the search tab, there's a display tab. If I click on this display tab, it provides me with available columns that I can add to that data grid, and I can also rearrange the display of each of those columns. So I'm going to go in here and I'm going to type in margin, and it provided me with what I'm looking for, which is gross profit margin, and I'm going to put that right under sale date, and then also operating profit margin. I'm going to put that under the gross profit margin. So if I scroll down, I'll see that those two have been added here. These two columns have been added in the header here. But it is looking kind of cramped, so I think I'm going to take out these 3 valuation multiples. And I can do that under this display section as well by just simply clicking this trash icon next to each of those valuation multiples. And if I scroll back down, they have now been removed from the data grid. So now that I have those fields added, what I'll do is I'll go up to the Download tab. And under the Download tab, I can now download just the fields that are in this data grid. And the way that I do that is making sure the Only Displayed Fields option is checked, and then clicking on the Excel download. So when I open up this Excel download, we'll notice that the only fields that have been downloaded are the ones that are displayed in my data grid. So that sums up scenario number 5. We're going to move, and that's our last scenario. So we're going to wrap up the rest of the presentation, and I'm going to turn it back over to Adam.
So really quick before we do that, can we stay on the platform? Sorry, I don't think we'll be able to get to all our questions. I know we've gone over our time a little bit. But I just want to hopefully do a couple quick ones because these are questions that we get frequently. So one is, if I want to recalculate my data, so basically redo the statistics, I think that's in Pratt Stats, we have the option to deselect transactions and recalculate, and the statistics would change. Basically, they want to know how do they do that in Deal Stats. So if you review transactions and you want to eliminate some and redo your statistics, how would I do that?
Yeah, so as you guys can see right now, there's currently 38 transactions that meet my criteria in this comparable set. If I go up to the Statistics tab, we'll notice that there's also 38 comparables here that are being used for these specific metrics. If I go back to the Data tab, and let's assume I don't want to use this first transaction, I can click on the checkbox and it will remove that one transaction from my calculations. Now it still says 38 up here at the top, but if we go back to the Statistics tab, we'll now notice that the count has dropped to 37. And so what that means is by simply unchecking that checkbox, it's removing it from any analysis within the database.
Excellent. And if somebody wants to no longer see that transaction, how would they basically make it non-viewable?
Sure, yeah. So now that we've unchecked this one transaction, let's assume that we don't want to see it any longer. We can do that by clicking this Hide Unselected button under the just above the data grid, and you'll notice that that transaction is no longer viewable within the data grid. If we would like to bring it back, and then so that we can add that transaction back into the calculations, we can click the Show Unselected, and we'll notice that it's now here. It's still unselected, but it is now viewable again.
Okay, excellent. And you don't have to do this, but would you just show people, so somebody wanted to know how can they generate, well basically they saw you pulling up individual transaction reports earlier, how would they generate one file with all transaction reports for their comparable company set, where would that be located?
Yeah, so the individual transaction reports are located to the left of each of the transactions in the row. But if we want to do one that incorporates all of them, we can do it all in one file and by clicking the Generate All Selected Reports.
Okay. Excellent. Okay, so let's just do one more. So somebody wants to know, if I make a mistake and delete something, how do I bring it back without having to reset? I think they're talking about deleting a field. So if somebody were to delete a field from, say, Quick Search or from Search, how would they go about bringing that field back?
Yeah, so if you delete a field, if you accidentally delete a field here on the Quick Search, we can actually add that search field back by clicking on the Add Search field. If it becomes removed from here, it'll be added to this list of which we can then add back.
Okay, excellent. And let's just jump really quick back to PowerPoint. I know we have to wrap this up. So we just want to kind of quickly share with you, I know you can download these slides, but we have gone back and have done a lot of research on our historical transactions, and we've been backfilling historical net sales, EBITDA, and SDE values. We've also been capturing this for new transactions that have been contributed to us, and we hope to publish this information later this summer. And so you're going to have some, historical growth rates for our transactions, as well as some, future, expected or projected growth rates. We're also adding some, additional fields related to real estate performance, and we're going to add a weighted harmonic mean calculation to our statistics tab. And yeah, just really quickly, just wanted to let you know, I know we went over, where this was located within the platform, but if you want, a little bit more assistance or a little bit more information, visit bbresources.com/products/dealstats. You'll find our video tutorials, our FAQ page, and our companion guide. And then, reach out to us anytime if you have any questions.